Hi everyone, I'm Trish Connor-Cato. Welcome to Analyzing Data with SQL Server Reporting Services, also referred to as SSRS. This video course is for those who will be the administrators of SSRS and who need to create dynamic paginated reports using the reporting tools. You'll also learn the SSRS administrative tasks during the course. When we begin the course, there is a Word document in the video description that I will review with you before we get started into the course. In this Word document, you'll find all the software requirements necessary to get your system ready for this course, as well as the links and instructions to download and configure software as necessary. Module 1 will introduce you to SSRS, its components, and its tools. This lesson is informational and will not require any hands-on activities. The subsequent modules are informational and hands-on. In Module 2, you'll learn about the data sources that are compatible with SSRS, their connection strings, and how to create both a data source and a data set. We will be creating them in both Report Designer via Visual Studio 2019 and Microsoft Report Builder. Module 3 is where you will begin to create paginated reports, again in both applications. You'll learn how to create reports from scratch as well as by using the report wizard. You'll also learn how to publish reports. Module 1 is an introduction to reporting services. This module has 3 lessons. The first lesson is the introduction. The second one will cover reporting services components, and lesson 3 will cover reporting services tools. Again, this module requires no hands-on interaction. SQL Server Reporting Services provides a set of on-premises tools and services that create, deploy, and manage mobile and paginated reports. The SSRS solution flexibly delivers the right information to the right users. Users can consume the reports via a web browser, on their mobile device, via email, or even through a file share. Paginated reports allow you to create modern-looking reports with updated tools and new features for creating them. The reason why they're known as paginated reports, a lot of reports nowadays are transmitted online in the cloud. Paginated reports gives you the ability, you can save them as a Adobe PDF or some other type of file, and they're printable. The new mobile reports with the responsive layout adapts to different devices and the different ways you hold them. So your different phones, your different tablets. And you have a modern web portal you can view in any browser. In the new portal, you can organize and display mobile and paginated reporting services reports and KPIs. You can also store Excel workbooks on the portal. Lesson 2 is about reporting services components. So the components are Report Designer. It's a robust tool that's designed for data professionals. It can be run from SSDT, that's SQL Server Data Tools, or as an add-on to Visual Studio. It generates report definition language files, known as RDL files, that control how reports will look and act. You also have Report Builder. It's a more straightforward tool designed to enable end users to create reports. It also generates RDL files. Reporting Services component takes RDL files as input and uses them to render the SSRS reports. And you have your web portal, which is used to manage, secure, and run the reports. This third and final lesson is Reporting Services Tools. The tools have been broken down into 3 groups. You have tools for report authoring, tools for report server administration, and tools for report content management. The tools for report authoring include the SQL Server Mobile Report Publisher. It also includes PowerView, which is an interactive data exploration and visual presentation experience It lets you create and interact with reports based on Analysis Services tabular modules. And then we have both Report Designer and Report Builder listed on this slide. They happen to be both components of SSRS as well as report authoring tools. Now we'll review the tools for report server administration. There are two different modes. There's native mode and SharePoint integrated mode. We'll tackle native mode first. So a report server configured for native mode runs as an application server that provides all the processing and management capability exclusively through reporting services components. You can use SQL Server Management Studio or the web portal to manage reporting services reports. A reporting services native mode installation consists of several server-side features that you will need to manage and maintain. They include the following: the report server web service, the background processing applications, and the report server database. Now I have a table here listing some of the tools that you'll use for administering in native mode. So you have Report Server Configuration Manager, which we'll be using later in this course. We'll be using SQL Server Management Studio. You have an RS config utility, RS key management utility, and Windows management instrumentation classes discussed on this table as well. So if you're using SharePoint integrated mode, you must use the content management pages on the SharePoint site to manage reports, shared data sources, and other report server items. Now, I'm listing this in the slide deck, and by the way, this slide deck is also included in the video description, but we're not going to be going into SharePoint integrated mode during this course. But I just wanted to introduce you to it. It would be an add-on that you would have to download in order to be able to use these tools. So there's SharePoint Central Administration, and PowerShell could be used as well for access. And finally, we have the tools for report content management. So this would be your report server web service URL, the web portal, and the RS utility, which is a script host you do from the command prompt. So the web portal, by the way, is for native mode only, not for SharePoint integrated mode. And it's used to administer a single report server instance from a remote location over an HTTP connection. Now, before we get into the next modules, which are all hands-on, we're going to review for a moment the software requirements. So I have this slide in the deck, but I'm actually going to bring up a Word document named Software Requirements that is in your video description to review with you. So this document is listing all of the components that you're going to need to be able to be hands-on in this course. So it doesn't really matter what version of SQL Server you have. There may be some differences with earlier versions, but I have this document set up with all the tools that you're going to need and links to where you can download these things. So there's a download for SQL Server 2019, which is what I'm running. The SQL Server database engine, you can get that from within a workload in Visual Studio, and you're going to need that in order to configure your report server. You're going to need SSRS, SQL Server Reporting Services. There's a download link there. We're also going to be using Visual Studio. I'm using the Professional 2019 version, and there's a link there where you can get the download. It also, when you're doing that install, you're going to select the SSDT, SQL Server Data Tools workload during the installation of Visual Studio. Once we start using Visual Studio, there are a few other extensions that we're going to want, and we'll get those from within Visual Studio, and I'll guide you through how to get those extensions. You're also going to need Microsoft Report Builder. There's a link to the download. There's SQL Server Management Studio, another link to the download. There's a section there, configuration help. If you're configuring and administering your report server in native mode, that will guide you through the process. You're going to need to download the SQL Server Mobile Report Publisher. And you're going to want to download the Power BI mobile app, which you can do from your mobile device from any app store, whether it's Android or Apple. With that, you're also going to need a Power BI account. Power BI has a free account that you can use. It needs to be a work or school account, but that would work for our purposes. And then we talked about SharePoint integrated mode, and there's a link. If you're going to want to use that, you're going to want to grab the add-in. So there's a link to the add-in for that. I have a few other things on this document which we'll reference later, but for right now, those are the main components that you're going to need in order to be able to be hands-on throughout the rest of this course. Module 2 is about reporting services data sources. We have 3 lessons in this module. We're going to talk about the available data sources for SSRS. You're going to learn in lesson 2 about connection strings. And in lesson 3, we will start creating our data sets. Before we get into this lesson, there is a WideWorldImporters database as a file in the video description. And I need you to grab that and move it to the specific directory on your C drive. So I'm showing you this directory in Windows Explorer, and you need to have that database. That's going to be the database that we're using for this course. It's a generic freeware database called WideWorldImporters. It's customers, products, sales, orders, all of that kind of stuff in that database. So that's the path that you want to copy that WideWorldImporters-full.back file into that particular directory. Our first lesson in this module is data sources. And on this slide, there are some of the data sources that are available that can be used within SSRS. So SQL Server is one of them. You have Azure SQL databases, Oracle, SharePoint list, all different kinds of data sources that can be accessed from SQL Server Reporting Services. And we're going to be focusing on data sources in this lesson. So you also have, in addition, custom data processing extensions and standard Microsoft.NET Framework data providers that can be installed and registered by system administrators. You also have on this slide some information and a couple of links. The middle box says many third-party standard.NET Framework data providers are available as downloads, and there's a link to the Microsoft Download Center there, and also from third-party sites. It gives you some information that you can search the SQL Server Reporting Services public forum for information about third-party data providers. And then there's a link on the right side of the slide where you can get all the information about all the data sources that are currently being supported. So when it comes to setting up a data source, you have to use a connection string. So you have to create a connection string to your data source. And on the right side of this slide, there's an article that gives you all the information you will ever need about creating data connection strings and important information related to data source credentials. But a data source includes the data source type, connection information, and the type of credentials to use. So we're going to be getting to that. We're going to start with data sources, move into setting up our data sources by using connection strings. And then the third lesson in this module, we will be creating our data sets. So each data set represents the result set from running a query command on a data source. The columns in the result set are the field collection. The rows in the results set are the data. A data set does not contain the actual data. It contains the information that is needed to retrieve a specific set of data from a data source. Then there are two types of data sets, embedded and shared. An embedded data set is defined in a report and used only by that report. A shared data set is defined on the report server and can be used by multiple reports. And you'll get examples of all of these during the course. In Report Builder, you can create shared data sets in shared data set mode or embedded data sets in Report Designer mode. In Report Designer and SQL Server Data Tools, you can create shared data sets as part of a project or embedded data sets as part of a report. And then you have a link on this slide as well with additional information from Microsoft. So now we're ready to get hands-on. The first thing we're going to need to do is get a connection to that WideWorldImporters database that you move to that specific directory on your hard drive. So I'm going to use SQL Server Management Studio to do this. I just typed SSMS in the search bar and it comes right up. So I'm going to launch that. If you've configured your report server, when you go into SQL Server Management Studios, you'll see this Connect to Server splash screen. It has my database engine there. There's all different types of engines that you can get to or services that you can get to. I'm leaving it on database engine. It has my server name and it has my authentication already there. So I'm going to click Connect. And it will take me into SQL Server Management Studio. And I don't need this section on the side to be as wide as it is. So I just decrease the width of it. And if you have a registered servers box up there, you can close that. We really just need Object Explorer in here for this part. So now that we're in here, we have to connect to the database that we saved into a program files directory. And it's a backup of the WideWorldImporters database. So in the Object Explorer, if I expand databases, I won't see WideWorldImporters there. We have to make that happen. I'm going to collapse databases, right-click on it, and choose Restore Database. When you get into the Restore Database dialog box, you're going to select Device under Source, and to the right of Device, you're going to click the ellipsis button. So it's looking for backup devices. So we got to give it the backup media. We're going to choose Add on the right, and it should take you directly to your backup folder where we stored WideWorldImporters-full.back. So mine is stored in a slightly different directory than yours because I have multiple instances of things on my computer, but it's still in a backup folder. So there's the WideWorldImporters backup, and at the bottom, I'm going to click OK. So it brings it here under Backup Media, and I'm going to click OK again. And now at the top, it says Ready. All right. When you click OK at the bottom, it's going to start restoring the backup. So you'll see that progress in the yellow band going across the top. When it's completed the process, you'll get a pop-up letting you know that it restored the database successfully, and you can click OK on that pop-up. Now, if you look in your list of databases, we have the WideWorldImporters database. If you expand it, and then expand the tables folder, you'll see all of the different tables in that database. Now, this is about SQL Server Reporting Services. This course is not really about SQL queries. So what I've done is I've already created the queries that we're going to use in this course. So we can go ahead and collapse WideWorldImporters. It doesn't have to be collapsed. That's just my OCD speaking here. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring up a new query window here that tells it to use the WideWorldImporters database. So you can either click the new query button up here on the toolbar, or I just do Control and the letter N to bring up a new query window. I'm going to go ahead and go into code snippets. There's another folder in there, SQL. You can leave that just like it is. I'm just going to put it in the root of code snippets. And I'm going to name it drill through query. And then save. So now we're going to do another new query. So I'm going to do Control N. I think I did it twice, so I've got two new query windows here. But on the second one, I'm going to go back over to the code Word document. And I'm going to copy the next query. And we're going to name this one main query. And you can save it in your code snippets. So go ahead and copy it. Go over to your SQL Server Management Studio, paste it. You always want to test it, so go ahead and F5 to execute it, and then save that one as main query. So you have 7 more queries in here, starting with the map query. Again, you're not selecting the text, and I'm going to have you get the rest of these into SQL Server Management Studio, and you want them each on their own query window. So new query for each one of these. Go ahead and get those in. At the end of the day, you'll have 9 total queries in there. So when you're done, you'll have 9 tabs. If you don't see all of the tabs, there is a drop down arrow all the way over in the upper right hand corner of your query tabs that you can use to access the rest of your query windows. So if you can't see all of them, you can do the drop down and you'll see all of your query windows. And when I was pasting the queries in, I was running each one, so I have results for each one at the bottom. So now that we have our database restored and we have our queries running here, we're about ready to set up our data source. And we're going to do that in our web portal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the search box and I'm going to type report, start typing report, and the report server configuration manager application should come up. So I'm going to go into there and it needs me to sign in. So I'm going to go ahead and connect. And when you went through to set up your report server, you used the report server configuration manager in native mode. And one of the things that you get in here is on the left, you have your web service URL, but you also have your web portal URL. And that's where we want to go. So I actually have my web portal URL saved in my browser, so it comes up automatically. But if you don't know how to get to it, this is your starting point. So I can click this link here, and it's going to require me to go ahead and sign in so I can get into the site. Finally got my credentials right. So it takes me into our web portal. So notice here when I went in, let me go over here to this tab. So I would have to refresh this tab. This is my default tab that comes up. But when I opened my browser earlier, I didn't sign in. So it's just blank there. I'll just close that. But this is your web portal. And from here, we're going to create a data source. So just a quick overview of your web portal. In the upper left-hand corner, you have, this is a link, it'll take you back to home if you click it. This is your name of the component, SQL Server Reporting Services. You have a favorites tab. We don't have anything in here. You can mark items in here as favorites and then get to them from the favorites tab. And when you go to browse, you're on the home page. There's another link to home there. On the right-hand side, you have a series of icons. You have new, upload, manage folder, tiles. And to the right of that, you have a search box, so you can quickly search for items that are stored in your web portal. Above all of that, you have a gear icon, and that is like getting to your settings in here. So you have the gear icon, you have a download icon, and you have a help question mark, as well as your user that's signed into the web portal. So what we want to do first is we want to create a folder in here that will contain all of the stuff that we're going to be doing during this class. So we're going to go to the new button and choose folder. It gives you a little warning there that, can't contain any of the following characters. So we're going to just name it SSRS, and we'll just call it video course, and create the folder. So it'll take a moment to show up on your home page. And when it does, you notice it gave it a heading of folders. We have one folder up here so far, and we're going to click on that folder to get into the folder. So this is where now in the upper left, it says SSRS video course. That's the folder you're in. If you wanted to go back to home, you could do that link underneath it to get back to the home page. I'm going to go back into the folder. So we're ready to set up our first data source using the appropriate connection string. So we're going to go back to new, and this time at the bottom, we're going to click on data source. And it brings you to the new data source screen. So the name, again, it can't contain any, interesting characters. And we're going to name it shared sales information. I'm not using spaces or anything. Because we're creating it in our web portal, it will be accessible to any of the reports that we're going to be doing. So it's a shared sales information data source. And if you look down, we don't have to put a description in. We could put created for the SSRS video course, sales information from WideWorldImporters database. If you wanted to, you could come in here at some point and hide the data source. We're going to leave that unchecked. And we're going to leave it checked that it's enabled. You could either hide it and disable it, or just hide it and have it enabled, so on and so forth. They're checkboxes. For your connection type, if you do the drop-down arrow, it's defaulting to SQL Server, and that's what we're going to be using. But you can see your other connection types listed in that drop-down. And in the connection string, you have to type data source and then an equal sign. Now, I've switched back over to SQL Server Management Studio just to show you this. This is what I have to put in for my next part of the connection string, the actual data source. In my case, it's going to be this win-IE2, no 4UCO3B, \evaluation. That's what I need to put in for mine. Whatever yours says there is what you're going to have to put in. So I'm going to go ahead and get that in there. And once I have that in, so it's connecting, right? Once I have that in, I have to tell it what actual database we're connecting to. And you do that after you get your information in. You're going to type a semicolon, and then you're going to type initial, and casing doesn't really matter here. Typing does. Initial catalog equals, and that's going to be the name of the database, which is WideWorldImporters, no spaces in between. So once you have that in, that's your connection string, the type of connection string you use for Microsoft SQL Server data sources. Then we scroll down, and under credentials, I'm going to choose the option button for using the following credentials. I'm going to leave it on my Windows username and password, and I'm going to go ahead and input my username and password. Once I do that, I'm going to want to test my connection. So click the Test Connection button, and it will tell me it connected successfully. If you get a pop-up saying that it couldn't connect, make sure you double and triple check your data source that you listed there, and make sure you have the semicolon after it. So once it's connected successfully, we're going to choose Create. So now you'll see your data sources. It has the category. We have one data source. It looks like the database icon, and it says Shared Sales Information. Now that we have our shared data source, we're ready to create our data set. You're actually going to be creating the data set in Report Builder, but you can access Report Builder from within SSRS. So we're going to go back to New, and we're going to choose Dataset, and you're going to get two pop-up boxes, even if you have Report Builder installed. So the bottom one says, we're opening Report Builder, and it lets you know if you run into issues, you'll need it installed on your computer, and you have a link to get it right there. The top one is when you already have it installed, you can go ahead and click Open to open the application. Because we chose New Dataset, it's on the New Dataset screen when it launches Report Builder, and we're going to go down to Browse Other Data Sources. Now, I have multiple training report servers, so I always like to browse, and I want to look in the correct one. So in this case, it's my training report server, just like that. It's in the SSRS video course folder, and there is our shared sales information data source, right? So you have to choose. So I have a couple because I have, like I said, multiple servers going, but I want to make sure I have the correct shared sales information one already selected. And then I'm going to go to the bottom right and choose Create. So it's asking me for my credentials, and I'm going to go ahead and enter them. And I'm going to go ahead and save my password with the connection and click OK. And I'm going to maximize Report Builder. We're going to use the main query that we put into SQL Server Management Studio. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to SQL Server Management Studio. And I'm going to find my main query tab. Again, my Object Explorer window doesn't need to be that wide. So I'm looking for main query. I'm going to just go to the drop down in the far right, switch to main query. I'm going to click anywhere within the query itself and do Control-A-C to select it and copy it. And then I'm going to switch back over to Report Builder. Now that I have the query copied to my clipboard, on the ribbon in Report Builder, you're going to click on Edit as Text. And in the text box, you're going to just do Control-V to paste that query in there. Now, if we want to make sure that it's going to work, there's a Run button, the red exclamation point on the toolbar. You can click that, and you'll see the query results on the bottom of the screen. Now we need to save our data set. So we're going to go up to the Save icon on the Quick Access toolbar in the upper left corner. And notice that it's putting you in your report server. And we're going to save this data set inside the SSRS video course folder. And we're going to call it Sales Info. And save it. So just to recap, so far, we created a shared data source in SSRS, and then we launched Report Builder from within SSRS to create our data set The shared data source, we used the connection string for Microsoft SQL Server, and we connected it to the WideWorldImporters database that we already restored. And then we did our data set, which is based off of the results of a query from SQL Server Management Studio. Now we're going to do this process, but just using a different tool all over again. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and launch Visual Studio. And when it's launched, on the right side, underneath all of those tiles, your choice is there. You're going to click on the link that says Continue Without Code. And it opens Visual Studio. And I just maximized it. So on the software requirements Word document we looked at earlier, there were 3 extensions that we needed to add once we got into Visual Studio. So I'm going to just walk you through that. If you look up at your menu bar at the top, you're going to click on Extensions and then Manage Extensions. So there are 3 different things that we want to have in here, and I already have these extensions. So you're going to scroll through. I'm looking at the Visual Studio Marketplace on the left. You're going to scroll down until you see SQL Server Integration Services Projects, and that's an extension you're going to want to add. So when you click on it, you'll get the download button, and you can do that. The next one is Microsoft Reporting Services Projects. You want to download that as well. And if I scroll down, let's see if I do have the third one in here. SQL Server, Microsoft. And there's the third one, Microsoft Analysis Services Projects. So you want Microsoft Analysis Services Projects, Microsoft Reporting Services Projects, and SQL Server Integration Services Projects. Those are the extensions that you're going to want in your Visual Studio. So go ahead and get those set up. And when you're done, you can just close the Manage Extensions box. You'll get a green check mark when you have those extensions enabled. Now that we have our extensions installed, we're going to go up to the File menu, hover over New, and click on Project so we can create our project file. When we get in here, you're going to click in the Search for Templates box, and you're going to type the word Report, and you'll see the list starts to populate. And what we want is a Report Server project. So I'm going to click on Report Server Project, and I'm going to choose Next. Now notice where it's storing this information. It's storing it in your local C drive, right? And so this is different than it's storing it in our web portal in SSRS. So we're going to name this Sales Information. And at the end of it, I'm going to put a capital V, capital S, so we know that we did this one in Visual Studio. We're going to leave the checkbox, Place Solution and Project in the same directory, checked. And we're going to click the Create button on the lower right corner. So if you take a look on the right side of your screen, your Solution Explorer window or panel should be open at the top. Properties could be open on the bottom. If you go to your View tab on the menu bar, if your Solution Explorer is not open, you can grab it from there. And the same with your Properties window. If you need that to be open, you can grab it from the View tab if it doesn't open automatically. In your Solution Explorer, you'll notice that it says Solution Sales Information VS 1 of 1 project. We've just created one project file, right? And so then it gives us the name of the file, again, Sales Information VS. Underneath it, it has 3 folders, Shared Data Sources, Shared Datasets, and Reports. All of them are empty. It's not pulling in the shared data source that we did in SSRS. It's not pulling in the shared data set that we did in Report Builder. We're recreating those steps just using a different way of doing it via Visual Studio. Now we're ready to create a shared data source in here. So in Solution Explorer, you're going to right-click on Shared Data Sources and choose Add New Data Source. So we're going to give it a name. We're going to call it Shared Sales Information, and at the end, VS. So we know we did this one in Visual Studio. For the type, in here, it defaults to Microsoft SQL Server Analysis Services, if you have that installed. We're going to just do the drop down and select Microsoft SQL Server, and we have to put in our connection string here. And because it's Microsoft SQL Server, it's the same connection string that we used in SSRS. So we're going to do data source equals, and then you have to put in your connection information. And then after that, a semicolon, and it's going to be initial catalog equals WideWorldImporters, the name of our database. Now in here, you have to go on the left side, you have to go to the Credentials tab. I'm going to choose Use this username and password, and I'm going to go ahead and populate that information. And I'm going to click OK. So now you'll see under Shared Data Sources in Solution Explorer, we have our Shared Sales Information VS. It's just a connection to our database. So I mentioned earlier that we had two different report authoring tools that we're going to be using. Report Builder, we've already been in. When you're working in Visual Studio, you're in Report Designer, and that's where we're at now. So now we're going to create a shared data set in here by right-clicking on Shared Data Sets in Solution Explorer and choosing Add New Data Set. So we're going to name this Sales Information VS. And we're using our shared data source that we created just a little while ago. And we're going to go down into the query box, and I'm going to do Control V to paste because I still had the main query from SQL Server Management Studio on my clipboard. In here, that's all we have to do when we're setting this up. So we're going to click OK at the bottom. Now, you may get this message, unable to connect to data source. If you click OK on that message, it brings up the entering data source credentials. And what you have to do here is you have to check the box underneath the password that says use as Windows credentials, then go ahead and click OK. And now you have your shared data set. Notice the icon differences. The data source looks like a database. The data set kind of looks like a spreadsheet with columns or something. So we've created a shared data source and data sets in both Report Builder and now in Report Designer via Visual Studio. So we've completed Module 2. And just to recap what we've done, we created data sources both in SSRS and in Visual Studio. So two different vehicles to get the same end result. You learned about the connection strings, and there's different connection strings for different data sources. We use the identical connection string because we're using SQL database in both Report Builder and Visual Studio. And then we created data sets in both Report Builder and Visual Studio. Now we get to start creating paginated reports in Module 3. There are 3 lessons in this module. In the first lesson, we'll create a report with the Report Builder report wizard. Second lesson, we're going to create a report in Report Designer via Visual Studio. And in lesson 3, we will be going over publishing reports. So I switched back over to Report Builder and closed out of the data source. And you can go to File. If you're still in your data source, that's fine. You saved it. You can go to File, New, and you'll get the new report or data set splash screen. So we want to use a wizard here. when we accessed Report Builder from SSRS, it only brought us to the new dataset screen because from the new dropdown in SSRS, we chose dataset. Now you're seeing what it looks like when you're not accessing it from SSRS. So we're going to choose the table or matrix wizard. We want to use a wizard for this first report. So I'm going to click on table or matrix wizard, and then I have to choose a data set. So what I'm going to do, if it defaulted to create a data set down at the bottom, you want to do the option button in front of choose an existing data set. If your data set is not showing there, you're going to click on browse, and you're going to go into your correct report server into the SSRS video course, and you can grab your data set from in there. And then we're going to do next. So this first screen that you get to after that is arrange the fields. So it has a list of the available fields in the data set, and there's some default behaviors. So any numerical field is automatically going to want to make a value field if you double click it in the available fields list. And the other fields will automatically want to be row groups when you double click them in the available fields list. So we're going to you'll see how this behavior works, and there's more than one way of doing it, of course, because it is a Microsoft product. So we're going to double click on, let's double click on order date under available fields, and it automatically puts it in a row group, which is where we want it to be. You can also drag and drop into those boxes. So we're going to drag order ID from available fields and drop it into row groups underneath order date. So when you're putting stuff in row groups, it means it's going to group first by order date, then by order ID. That's what we're saying to do there. Then we have some value fields. Oh, you know what else to put in there? Double click stock item name and make that go into row groups as well. And then we're going to go to values. We want to populate the values box. And we want to populate values with, you can double click quantity and transaction amount. And notice they both default to sum. To the right of each of them in the values box, you have a drop down arrow, so you can change the aggregate function that's being used. We're going to leave them on sum. And we're going to choose next. So let's talk about the options on this choose the layout screen. We're going to leave it checked to show subtotals and grand totals. And we're going to have it in the blocked with the subtotal below layout, the default there. We are going to uncheck expand collapse groups on that screen. So let's talk about this preview and what it's showing you here. So the first row will repeat once for the table just to show column headings. The second row will repeat once for each order date, order ID combination and display the item name, order quantity, and transaction amount. The third row will repeat once for each order ID to display the subtotals. So this is the third row here. Then you have the fourth row will repeat once for each order ID to display the subtotals per day, per date. And then the fifth row will repeat once for the table to display the grand totals. So this first total that you see in row 3, that one is going to repeat once for each order ID to show your subtotals. The next total in row 4 is going to repeat once for each order ID to display the subtotals per date. And then the last total will show at the end of the report, and it will display the grand total. We're going to go ahead and choose next. So you get a preview again, and you can go ahead and click finish on your preview. And for some reason, it switched me over to SSMS, so I'm going to fix that. Now, before we run this report to see what it looks like, we're going to just do a few little formatting things, especially for our numbers and our date. So that's what we're going to do right now. So the first thing we're going to do, on the Home tab in the number group, I'm going to have you click on that 1, 2, 3 button. And we're going to choose sample values because it defaults to placeholders. And when you're formatting your numbers, you're going to want it to show you some sample values at that point. So you see that the format looks correct. So we change that to sample values. And now what we're going to do is we're going to select the transaction amount fields in rows 2 through 5. So I'm going to click on the first transaction amount. I can hold down my shift key and click on the other 3 transaction amounts in rows 2 through 5 is what we want to have selected. And on the home tab in the number group, we're going to do the $. So we get the currency format, and you'll see the sample value now, right? So it's always going to be that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we see the sample value instead of not being able to see it. And it has the currency format. So that's the first thing we're going to do here. We're going to also select our quantity fields in rows 2 through 5. And in the number group on the home tab where it says default, you're going to do the drop down and just choose number. And then we're going to say we don't want any decimal places. So I'm going to use the decrease decimal button right underneath the number drop down to get rid of the 2 decimal places. Now dates always default to the date time format, and we just want the date. So we're going to select the order date in row 2. We want to grab the field, the order date field. So the box around it shows the whole field is selected. And in the number group, we're going to do the default drop down and select date. So you see how it gives us the 1/31/2000? It's just giving us the date and not a time there, right? And then what we can do is in that order date box where it has the date, we're going to right click to format the date to a different format. So we're going to right click and we're going to go to text box properties from the shortcut menu. On the left side, click on number. Notice it's already on date because we changed it to date on the ribbon. We could have done the whole thing in here. So we changed it to date, and now we have all of these different formats. So the format that we want, might have to, let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, you might need to scroll down a little bit. We want the one that just says January 31st, 2000. And we're going to click OK. So by doing that in this view, you'll see that the column is not wide enough to support that date format. So you can put your mouse in the gray band at the top in between order date and order ID, click and hold, and drag over to the right a little bit so you see the full date. Now we'll do a little bit more formatting on this, but let's see what we have so far. So the first button on the home tab of the ribbon is the Run button, or you could press F5 just like in SQL Server Management Studio. So I'm going to go ahead and run. And when it's done loading, I can see the data. There's our date format that we did, right? So each order date, order ID combination gives us a total quantity, right? And the total transaction amount. So order ID 1 on January 1st, 2013, there's the total. Order ID 2, there's the total. Now you can use this Run tab on the ribbon to navigate. Let's go to the last page of the report. So all you're going to see there is the report footer. And I'm going to use the previous page button to go to the next to the last page. If I scroll down to the bottom of that page, you'll see your grand total. So after every day, you're getting a daily total. Every line item in terms of order ID, order date combinations, you're getting totals. And you can go back to the first page. And we want to go back to Design View, which is now the first button on the Run tab of the ribbon. So I got a little ahead of myself and I deleted the text box, which was in the page footer. So I want to get rid of the whole footer. I want you to do it too. So we're going to just right click in a blank area and choose remove page footer. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to change the name of some of our column headings. So order date is just going to become date. I'm double clicking order and pressing delete. Order ID is just going to become ID. I just want stock item name to be name. So I'm going to adjust that. So stock item name, I'm just going to do it this way. Old school, just redo it. Quantity, we're going to change to QTY. So we don't need the whole word to show there. So QTY. And transaction amount is just going to be amount. So we're adjusting our column headings so they're different than our query results. But that's fine. We just want them to read a little bit different. And because we did that, we are also going to decrease the width of our order ID field because it doesn't need to be as wide. So I'm using the gray band above it, putting my mouse between ID and name and dragging backwards a little bit. The name field we really want to expand, so the name shows. And we should expand the amount field just a little bit. I'm actually going to give some more to the name field. I'm going to expand quantity just a hair as well. So we have that resolved. And now what we need to do is get the report title as well as the header row, the column heading row, to repeat on every page. So let's start with the report title. You want to select it so it has the sizing boxes all around it. And you need your properties window open on the right for this. If it's not open, you can go to the View tab of the ribbon and check the box in front of Properties. So the properties are arranged in categories in alphabetical order, so you have action, alignment, so on and so forth. We want to scroll down to the other category. And just so you know, when you have a table or a matrix, it is in what's known as a zone, and the zone is called a tablix, Tablix. So we have one table in this report so far, so there's only one tablix in this report so far. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because in the properties window, in the other group, let me make sure I reselect my header because it's not selected. So in the other group, there is a repeat with property. You're going to click in the text box to the right of repeat with and do its drop down arrow. And we want it to repeat with this table. So that is Tablix 1. So that's for the title. Now, unfortunately, we can't use the same method for the header row here. So what we're going to do is on the View tab of the ribbon, in the Show Hide, you're going to put a check mark in front of grouping, and you get a grouping panel that opens on the bottom of your screen. So it's showing our order date, order ID, stock item names, and row groups. To the right of column groups, there's a drop-down arrow. Click it and click on Advanced Mode. So now if you look, you have a bunch of statics in your row and column groups. We're going to click on the first static under row group, and it selects the very first field in the grid, right? The date field. So now we're going to use the property sheet for this. Notice at the top of the property sheet, it says it's a member of the table. It's a Tablix member, that date field, that whole row, right? So in other, where repeat on new page is set to true, but we have to tell it to keep with group. So where it says none next to keep with group, we're going to do the drop down and select after. Both of those settings need to, if you just did repeat on new page and we ran it, it wouldn't repeat on new page. You have to tell it to keep it with the group as well. Now that we have that done, we can go to the drop down next to column groups again. Click on Advanced Mode to get out of there. On the View tab, we can uncheck grouping. We'll leave our Properties window open. And we're going to go back to the Home tab of the ribbon and run the report again. So now if we go to the next page, you'll see both the report header and the first row, the header row from the table, are repeating on every page. And I'm going to go to the last page and just make sure, and then, you got to scroll up a little bit maybe. Well, no, now I don't have to. So on the last page, I see my totals and their columns are wide enough to display them well. Let's go back to design view, and this would probably be a good time to save this report. So let's go up to the save icon on the quick access toolbar. We're going to go into our SSRS video course folder, and we're going to call this one, we'll call it sales info, and we'll just put RB for report builder, sales info report builder, and save. So we just created a paginated report in the form of a table using the report wizard in Report Builder. Now I'm back in Report Designer via Visual Studio, and we're going to recreate that same table report from scratch in this application. And you'll be able to see the differences as we go through. So what we need to do in Solution Explorer, we already have our project open, Sales Information VS. We have our shared data source, our shared data set. We're going to right click on the reports folder and we're going to hover over add. Now, if we go to add new report here, it will take us into its report wizard. We want to create this one from scratch. So after you hover over add, you're going to click on new item. It defaults to report, and we're going to name this report at the bottom. We're going to name it sales info VS for Visual Studio and click add. So it gives us the canvas from which we can create our report. And so from this canvas, we're going to right click, hover over insert, and click on table. So now it opens up the dataset properties dialog box where it says choose a data source and create a query. So what we're going to do here is we're going to name this first. We're going to name it table report from scratch. And we're going to use our shared data set, which is sales information VS. And we're going to click OK at the bottom. So it gives us the framework of a table, and I'm going to just move that framework to the upper left corner of that box inside the canvas, the page box. And we're going to start adding our fields and everything here at this point. We're going to be using the report data panel on the left side of your screen. If it's not showing, you can go to your view menu, and all the way at the bottom, you can open it by clicking on Report Data. In the Report Data pane, you're going to expand data sets. So you can see that even though we based this off of the Sales Information VS shared data set, we named it Table Report from scratch. And so we could have named it the same thing or anything different. I'm just trying to be specific for what we're doing here as well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use drag and drop for the fields that we want in this report. So we're going to drag order date into the first column of the table. We're going to drag order ID into the second column of the table. We're going to grab stock item name and put it in the third column of the table. Now at this point you have some choices. I'm going to show you the most efficient way of doing this because we have more table columns that we want to add here. So we could right click on the gray bar above stock item, hover over insert column and choose left or right. In our case, we would want to choose right. But there's a more efficient way of doing this. So instead of inserting it, our next field that we're going to want in the report is the quantity field. So I'm going to grab the quantity field from Report Data pane, and I'm going to drag it over to the right of stock item, and you'll see that blue guideline, and it has a plus sign attached to your mouse. So when I let go, it creates the new column and puts the field in there. And then we have one more field we're going to add, which is transaction amount. So I'm going to drag that over to the right of quantity and drop it when I see the blue guideline. Now that we have our fields in, we're going to change our column headings just like we did in the other one. So we just want it to be date, ID, name. Next one, we're going to do QTY for quantity. And we're going to just have amount for the last one. So we're recreating the exact same report, just using Report Designer via Visual Studio as opposed to Report Builder using the wizard. And we're doing this one from scratch. So we have our column headings, and now I'm going to resize the table. Kind of similar. We know what we want our column widths to be, kind of. I want to make sure that that stock item name column is pretty wide and increase the size of the amount column just a little bit. So we learned from how the data flowed in the other paginated report. Quantity might need to be widened just a bit as well. So, and notice it'll just like in Report Builder, it extends the framework for the page. So we have all of that stuff in there right now. So we're going to take a moment to preview the report. And I will tell you right now, when we go to preview it, you'll probably get an error. And I'll show you the simple fix for that error. So in here, we don't have run. You're on the design tab, and then there's a preview tab to the right of it. So we're going to do preview to preview the report. And of course, now it's not going to give me the error. All right, so if you got an error, I still want to walk you through what you would need to do to fix this. And this is on me. When we set up the shared data source, I made a mistake when we set that up. So I see a couple of things on my report that I'm going to need to change, like I didn't change it to QTY, it's QITY. While I'm in here, I'm going to navigate to the last page. So the right pointing arrow with the line on it. And I'm going to scroll to the bottom. There's no totals. There's none of that stuff going on here. And there's no groupings. If I go back to the first page, we'll see that there's a line item entry for January 1st, 2013 for each order ID instead of just having one January 1st, 2013. So we're going to have to do our groupings and stuff as well. Let's go back to Design View. And I'll show you what to do if you got an error when you went to preview the report. So when we set up the shared data source, I'm in Solution Explorer. I'm going to double click that shared sales information VS data source. And I'm going to go to the credentials tab. So it's set to use this username and password. If you got an error, right, you would change it to use Windows authentication. And then it would bypass an error. So if you went to preview it and you got an error, you need to change it to Windows authentication. I'm going to leave mine the way it was and click OK. All right, so let's handle what we have to do next, our groupings. If your grouping pane is not open on the bottom of your screen, you can right-click anywhere in the blank area, and you can hover over View and click on Grouping. And so we need to group by order date and then by ID in this grouping pane. Right now, by default, and it will always have in the row groups, equal details. So we're going to use our report data pane on the left, and we can drag and drop from there to the row groups. So what we want to do is we want to drag order date, and we want to drag it down the row groups. You'll have a blue guideline, and you want that guideline above equal details. So now your row group should look like mine. And something happened on your report layout, right? Now you have an order date field with brackets. If I click on it, you'll see the bracket in the row header, right? You actually have two date fields now. You have one, the grouping field, which we called order date, which is called order date. And then we have the one that we renamed date. And we will fix that in a moment after we get done with the rest of our grouping. So we want to drag order ID down and place it under order date and above equal details in row groups. So now we get another order ID field, and that also is a grouping field, right? If I look at my table now, I'll see this double dotted line to the right of the order ID field. Anything to the left of that double dotted line is in a group. Anything to the right of it isn't. So what we need to do is we need to delete our original date and ID fields. So date and ID, we're going to delete those columns. And then we're going to rename order date, the grouped one, to just date, and order ID, the grouped one, to just ID. And we can make that ID column not quite as wide. I'm going to go ahead and make my stock item name column a little bit wider, and I'm going to correct my typo on QTY. So now this is how you manually do the grouping, by using your grouping pane on the bottom of your screen and dragging and dropping. Now we're going to format our date and our value fields, our values fields, quantity and amount. So what you're going to do is you're going to right click. So in this second row where it has order date in brackets, that is known as an expression. We're going to right click on that expression field, and we're going to choose text box properties. And we did this in Report Builder, right? In Report Builder, we actually changed it to a date format, and then we went in here and gave it a specific date format. So on the left side, we're going to click on number. We're going to choose date, and we're going to find the format that says January 31st, 2000, and click OK. And now we're going to go over to our quantity field, our quantity expression rather. Right click, text box properties. We want this to be a number, and we're going to choose number, and we're going to take away the decimal places and click OK. And then for our transaction amount, we're going to right click on the expression, and we are going to go to text box properties, number, and we're going to select currency with 2 decimal places for this one and click OK. When we used the wizard in Report Builder, there was a box that defaults to being checked where it included subtotals and grand totals. Because we're doing this from scratch, we have to do those manually. And it's not very hard to do in here, actually. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our subtotals. So we're going to right click on the transaction amount expression, and we're going to choose add total. So right underneath it, it gives us the sum of the transaction amount. And then we're going to right click on the quantity expression and do the same thing, add total. So we get our sum of quantity. Now we're going to add our daily total. So we're going to right click on the order ID expression, hover over add total, and this time you have a choice, before or after. We're going to do after. And we're going to set up one more, and this is going to be the grand total. We're going to right click on the order date expression, add total, and after. So now, the total that's in the date column, you're going to click into the cell where it says total, and before the word total in that cell, we're going to add the word grand. In the total, in the ID column, before that word total, we're going to add the word daily. And I'm going to expand the ID column a little bit just so daily total doesn't wrap. Now we're going to highlight all the cells in the grand total row. So I'm just clicking on the grand total row header. And we're going to do a little formatting on this row by using the toolbars at the top. So what we want to do is we want to give the total row, we'll make it bold, and we'll give it a light blue background color. So the double boxes next to the letter A with the dots underneath it, that's your background color. And I'm going to just choose a light blue color and click OK. Let's go ahead and preview our report and see what it looks like. I'm going to go to the last page so I can see my grand totals. I might have to go back one page until it resolves itself. So it looks like our quantity field doesn't need to be as wide as it is because, it's showing more than enough in that grand total. And it looks like we can even minimize the width of our amount field as well. I'm going to go back to page 1. And we also want to widen the date column. So we're going to decrease the width on quantity, a little bit on amount. We're going to widen the date column, and we could probably decrease the width of the ID column as well. So let's go back to design mode. And I'm going to decrease the width on, I'm going to widen the date column first. Decrease the width on the ID column. I want to keep it so I can see the words daily total. And I'm going to decrease quantity just a little bit, the amount one just a little bit. And then I'll use the extra space for that name column and take a look at that in preview. And I've navigated to the last page just so I can see my grand totals are displaying well. And I'm quite happy with the way it looks right now. So my ID column could be a little bit less wide, but other than that, I'm quite happy with the look of it right now. Let's go back to design view. And this might be a good time to save. So you have on the toolbar, you have save selected items and save all. I usually just do save all. So you want to update it. So since we're creating this from scratch, we're going to have to add a report header text box. So what I'm going to do is I am going to select my table. If I click on the bottom edge of it, it'll get the sizing handles around it, and it'll give me the ability to move the table. So I'm going to just move my table down a little bit, and I'm going to right click in that blank area above the table, hover over insert, and choose text box. And I'm going to move the text box so it's in the upper left-hand corner. And I'm going to resize it so it spans the width of the table. And I'll go ahead and make it just a wee bit taller as well. And in that text box, you're going to type sales information. And then click on the edge of the text box again to make sure it's selected. And we're going to make the font bold and italic. So without selecting the font, if the text box is selected, you can just make those choices and it applies to what's in the text box. We're going to make it 22 point. We're going to center it. And we have that on there. Now, we're going to run into a similar situation. Let's preview again. And if you navigate to page 2, you'll see that the text box header that we put on sales information is not showing. Neither are the column headings. So just like when we did it through the wizard. And the fix is pretty much the same. So we're going to go back to design view, and we are going to fix those items. So with the sales information text box selected, make sure your properties pane is visible. If not, you can go to the view menu and you'll see properties window almost at the bottom to make it show. And it's going to be the same thing. So I'm going to make sure I reselect my text box. And in the properties, notice at the top it says text box 35. It just gave it a default name. I'm going to scroll down to the other section. This is exactly identical to what we did last time in Report Builder. And I'm going to find the repeat with property, and select the drop down and choose Tablix 1, our table. So repeat that text box with the table. That's step 1. Now we have to get the column headings to show. So this is where in our grouping pane, we went to the right of column groups. We did the drop down and chose advanced mode. So this is exactly the same in here as it is in Report Builder. And in the row group section, we clicked on the first static and it selected the date field, the very first column heading rather, in our table. And so what we're going to do with that static field is we're going to go over to properties and we're going to navigate down and you'll get to the other category. And in here, we're going to say repeat with. So this is a little bit different. And we're going to choose Tablix 1. So this is the same as what we do with the text box here, right? It's the same process that we're doing. In Report Builder, when it came to the column headings, we selected the first static, and then we found the repeat on new page property and set that, and it was already set to true, and we had to make sure keep with group was set to after. So here it's slightly different for the header row, but exactly the same as for our report title text box. So when I preview it and I go to the next page, I can see both the text box that we used as a report header is repeating, as well as the column headers are repeating. Let's go back to Design View and let's select our column header row and just make it bold. And then go ahead and save again. So now I know you're probably getting a little annoyed with this particular report since this is the second time we've created it, but bear with me just a little bit longer. You're going to get to do other types of reports, I promise. What I'm going to have you do now, I'm going to get you started on this, but we're going to recreate this report again using the wizard in Report Designer. So to get started, we're going to right click on the reports folder in Solution Explorer. And this time we're going to choose Add New Report to start the wizard. And if you choose not to have this splash screen come up, you can say, don't show this page again. We're going to do next, right? You're going to be using your shared data source here. So work your way through this wizard to create the same report that we've just done 2 other times. Just in case you're stuck on this screen of the wizard to design the table, you can look at what I'm using for page group and details here in Report Designer. On the last page of the wizard, I chose to preview the report, so it took me right into preview mode. And I'll just say one key difference here is that the subtotals, when we did it in Report Builder wizard, it let us choose where the subtotals would be placed. And here we didn't have that choice. So the subtotals are above each item in this type of report that we do in here. So if you like, you can go ahead and go to Design View and you can spend a few moments and do your column widths and change the names of your column headings and stuff of that nature. And you want to format your date and your number fields as well. So I've done my formatting and this is my result. And good job to you for working your way through that. Again, you can always rewind and look at earlier parts of the video where I was walking you through the formatting. But well done, everybody. Go ahead and go back to Design View and save. Our last lesson in this module is publishing reports. So when you save a report in Report Builder, you do have an option to save it locally or to a report server. So we've been saving ours to our report server to SSRS. When you save a report in Report Designer, it is saved locally. In order to save it to the report server, you must deploy it. Deploy is the SQL Server Data Tools word for publishing. You'd also need to deploy any shared data sources and data sets in order to deploy the reports. And we'll be doing that shortly. So you can create, this next section is talking about project configurations when you're deploying. You can create multiple deployment configurations and then use a different one depending on the deployment scenario. Configurations include properties for building reports, such as the folder in which to temporarily store the report and how to handle build issues. They also have properties that you use to specify the location and version of the report server and the folders on the report server. So SSDT provides 3 project configurations: debug local, debug, and release. Its default configuration is debug local, and we're talking about in Visual Studio now for Report Designer. It's used to view reports in a local preview window. The debug configuration is used to publish reports to like a test server, and the release configuration is used to publish reports to a production server. So I also have on this slide how to edit and create new configurations. There's a link there to the Microsoft Docs topic on that. So I've switched back over to SSRS and I'm on the home screen. I'm going to go into the SSRS video course folder, and now we can see the paginated report that we created in Report Builder. We're seeing the data set that we created in Report Builder, and we're seeing the data source that we created here in SSRS. What we're not seeing at this point is anything we've created in Visual Studio, and that is because those items are being saved locally, and we have to deploy or publish them, if you will, in order to get them up here in SSRS. So I'm going to switch back over to Visual Studio now. In Visual Studio in Solution Explorer, you want to make sure that you're on the project. So Sales Information VS, the one that's in bold, that can be collapsed, not the one at the top that says Solution Sales Information VS. So once that is selected, right underneath the Solution Explorer title bar, you'll see several icons. There's one that looks like a wrench, and if you hover over it, it will give you properties, and we're going to do that. This is where you have to set your target server URL. So it defaults to this localhost report server or something will be there, but that is not my target server. That's not where my SSRS is. So I'll show you how to find out what your target server is right now. So I've gone into my report server configuration manager, and I'm on the web portal URL tab on the left. This URL is the one that we need to put in as our target URL. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on my screen, put in what I have to put in, and you should do the same on yours. So I just typed over what was there. I put in my path, my target server URL, and at the bottom, I'm going to click away from that and apply, and then I'm going to choose OK. So now that we've set our configuration to release and we made sure we have the right target URL, we're ready to deploy. Now you can deploy the individual items. You can deploy the data source, you can deploy the data sets, you can deploy the reports individually, but there's a far more efficient way of doing this. This is when I'm going to right click on the line in the Solution Explorer that says Solution Sales Information VS one of one project. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose Deploy Solution. And you'll get an output window at the bottom of your screen underneath your grouping panel. And the end result of my output is it says it deployed, 1 succeeded, 0 failed, 0 skipped. Now, sometimes you'll get a fail with a message, and usually that means that your target server URL has not been set. So I'll save you a lot of research time in trying to overcome how to fix that by setting it before we even attempt it to deploy. So what does this mean now? It means that we've essentially published everything in here, the data source, the data set, and the 2 reports to SSRS. Let's go to SSRS and take a look. I'm going to navigate to the home screen, and I'm going to do Control R to refresh. And when I do so, I'll see that I have data sources folder here. And when I click on it, it's the shared sales information VS data source. Go back to home. I have the data set that we created in Visual Studio, back home, and I have sales information VS folder, which has the 2 paginated reports that we created in Visual Studio. So we created a folder when we first came in here called SSRS video course. And what I want to do is I want to kind of keep everything in there. Now, this is partly my OCD, but it's also how I work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the ellipsis in the top of the data sources tile, and I'm going to choose move. And I'm going to move it to SSRS video course and select. I'm going to do the same with the datasets folder and with the sales information VS folder. So now when I go into SSRS video course folder, I have those 3 other folders in there. So that's everything that's coming in from VS, from Visual Studio, from Report Designer. And then everything that's just out here, paginated reports, data sets, and data sources, are from within Report Builder. Just to recap what we covered in Module 3, we started with Lesson 1, where we used a report wizard in Report Builder to create a table report. You learned how to format the values and the dates in the report, how to resize the columns, add a title to the report and all of that kind of stuff, and make it repeat, both the report title and the header row repeat on every page of the report. In Lesson 2, we created a report, the same report from scratch in Report Designer via Visual Studio. And we did the same kind of formatting that we did with the report we created in Report Builder. Afterwards, I challenged you to use the wizard in Report Designer to create the report. After that, we talked about publishing a report, which in Visual Studio is really deploying it. So when we're doing our reports and our data sets and all of that in Report Builder, they're automatically up in SSRS. When we do it in Visual Studio through Report Designer, that is not the case. So we had to set our target URL, and then we deployed the solution and we took a look at it in SSRS. And we also did some folder cleanup in there, if you will, to get everything in the SSRS video course folder. Thank you for attending the SSRS video course. In conclusion, what did we cover? Well, we started with an introduction to reporting services. You learned about the reporting services components and tools. In the second module, we got into reporting services data sources. So we set up data sources using connection strings appropriate for SQL Server. And then we created data sets, and we did these in both Report Builder and Report Designer. We moved on to Module 3, where we started creating paginated reports. We began by using the report wizard in Report Builder. Then we created a report from scratch in Report Designer via Visual Studio. And then you learned that in Report Builder, when you save a report, it's being saved to the report server. In Report Designer, when you save a report, it's being saved locally. In order to get it up to the server, you need to publish it, which is known as deploying it.